The twin suns of Verithra scorched the dunes of the crimson wastes, turning the air into a shimmering furnace that swallowed sound and hope alike. Sand, red as dried blood and sharp as glass, stung the exposed skin of Corporal Joran Vale as he dragged his wounded leg through the endless sea of desert. His armor, once the proud cerulean blue of the Terran Expeditionary Corps, was scorched black in places, cracked in others, and caked with grime that no amount of scrubbing would ever remove. Around him, the wreckage of war lay scattered like discarded toys. Shattered drones, half-buried mechs with limbs torn off, and the silent, twisted forms of the fallen, human and Verithran alike. The battle had ended hours ago, not with a decisive victory, but with exhaustion. Both sides had simply run out of will to kill. Joran hadn't expected to survive. He'd been pinned beneath a collapsed skiff when the plasma barrage hit. His comms dead, his squad gone. He'd crawled out only because the heat inside the wreckage threatened to cook him alive. Now, half delirious from pain and thirst, he stumbled over a ridge and saw her. She lay half-buried in the sand, one arm outstretched toward a fallen ceremonial dagger, the other clutching a wound in her side that wept a luminous cobalt fluid. Her skin was the deep, iridescent blue of twilight over an ocean. Her hair the same hue but lighter, like strands of spun sapphire catching moonlight. Even in her near-death state, she radiated an otherworldly grace. High cheekbones, almond-shaped eyes closed in pain, and ears that tapered into elegant points. A Verithran royal. He recognized the sigil on her tattered robes, the twin serpents coiled around a crescent moon. Princess Lyra of House Vale. Joran should have kept walking. Protocol demanded it. Humans and Verithrans had been at war for 3 cycles over mineral rights and orbital dominance. To aid an enemy commander, let alone royalty, was treason. But something in her stillness, in the way her chest barely rose, hooked into his gut like a grappling line. He'd seen enough death today. He wouldn't add hers to the tally if he could help it. Groaning, he knelt beside her, ignoring the fire in his leg. He pulled a medkit from his belt, nearly empty, but it held 1 emergency coagulant injector and a plasma expander. Problem was, human meds rarely worked on Verithrans. Their biology ran on different frequencies, their blood thick with trace metals and bioluminescent compounds. He'd heard stories of soldiers trying to share rations or water with captured Verithrans, only to watch them convulse and die from allergic shock. But then he remembered the whispers from the medics back at Base Theta. Verithrans could accept human blood, in rare cases, if the donor carried a specific genetic marker. It wasn't transfusion in the traditional sense. It was more like a catalyst jump-starting their own regenerative systems. Joran had been tested during recruitment. He was a match, 1 in 10,000. He didn't hesitate. With trembling hands, he prepped the field transfusion kit, jabbed the needle into his own vein, and then gently into the thin, blue-veined arm of the princess. The moment the first drop of his crimson blood mingled with her cobalt plasma, her eyes snapped open, wide, startled, and impossibly bright, like twin stars igniting in a storm. She gasped, not in pain but in shock. Her pupils dilated, and for a heartbeat, Joran thought he'd killed her. But then her body arched slightly, and a soft, resonant hum escaped her lips, a sound like wind through crystal chimes. The glowing wound in her side began to knit itself together, the edges sealing with a faint silver sheen. She stared at him, not with the hatred he expected, but with something far more dangerous. You? She whispered, her voice melodic but strained. You gave me your life essence. It's just blood? Joran muttered, pulling the needle free and pressing a sealant patch over the puncture. Don't make it weird. But on Verithra it was weird. In fact, it was sacred. In Verithran culture, the voluntary sharing of blood between 2 beings, especially across species, was the highest form of bond, reserved only for soulmates or blood oaths of eternal loyalty. To give one's blood to save another was to declare them kin, protector, and, in the case of royalty, consort. Joran didn't know any of this. He was too busy trying not to pass out from blood loss and dehydration. He slumped beside her, head lolling back against a rock. If you're gonna kill me, he mumbled, do it quick. I've had a long day. Lyra sat up slowly, testing her limbs. The pain was gone. In its place was a strange warmth radiating from her core, a human warmth. She studied the man beside her. Sunburned, scruffy, with eyes the color of storm clouds and a mouth that looked like it had forgotten how to smile. He was nothing like the Verithran nobles she'd been raised to admire. Tall, poised, elegant, and emotionally constipated. This human was rough, blunt, and smelled faintly of ozone and sweat. And yet, he'd saved her. "You are Joran Vale," she said suddenly, recognizing the name stitched on his uniform flap. He blinked. "You know me?" "I know of you," she corrected. "You were the one who disabled the orbital relay during the siege of Kales. My brother called you the Ghost of Theta. He said you moved like shadow and fought like fire." Joran snorted. "Your brother tried to vaporize me with a plasma cannon. Not exactly a fan letter." Lyra's lips twitched, almost a smile. "He respects you. That is rare." Before Joran could respond, the distant whine of engines cut through the desert silence. Verithran skiffs, sleek, obsidian black, shaped like diving falcons, swooped low over the dunes. Reinforcements, or executioners. Lyra stood, brushing sand from her robes, her posture regal once more. She turned to Joran. "You will come with me." "Like hell I will," he said, trying to stand and failing. "I'm not your prisoner." "You are not my prisoner," she said, kneeling again and gripping his arm with surprising strength. "You are my savior, and by the old laws of my people, that makes you my betrothed." Joran stared at her, certain the heat had finally fried his brain. "You're what? Betrothed?" she repeated, as if it were the most natural thing in the galaxy. When a Verithran of royal blood receives lifeblood from another, it is binding. "You have claimed my life, Joran Vale. Now you must claim my hand." He let out a dry, humorless laugh. "Lady, I didn't claim anything. I was trying not to watch you die in the dirt. There's a difference. The universe does not care for your intentions," she said simply. "Only your actions." The skiffs landed in a perfect crescent around them, kicking up clouds of red dust. Soldiers in iridescent armor poured out, weapons raised, but not at Joran. They knelt, heads bowed, as Lyra helped the human to his feet. One of the soldiers, a tall male with silver markings on his cheeks, stepped forward. "Princess," he said, voice tight with urgency, "the High Council has declared you dead. Your uncle has taken the throne. He calls your survival inconvenient." Lyra's eyes hardened. "Then we return to the spire not as mourners, but as conquerors." She turned to Joran, who was swaying on his feet. "You will ride with me." "I can barely stand," he grumbled. "You will lean on me," she said, and before he could protest, she slung his arm over her shoulders. Her skin was cool to the touch, a relief against his feverish heat. "And if you faint, I will carry you." "Don't flatter yourself," he muttered, but he didn't pull away. As they boarded the lead skiff, Joran caught the looks from the Verithran soldiers. Curious, wary, some openly hostile. He was an enemy, a human, and now, apparently, the future prince consort of Verithra. The absurdity of it almost made him laugh. Almost. The skiff shot skyward, leaving the battlefield behind. Below, the red sands swallowed the dead. Above, the twin suns began their slow descent, painting the sky in violent oranges and purples. Joran closed his eyes, exhaustion pulling him under. But not before Lyra whispered something so softly he almost missed it. "Thank you, my blood giver." Back in the capital city of Javale, carved into the heart of a floating obsidian mountain, the political storm was already brewing. News of the princess's return, and her human savior, spread like wildfire through the crystalline data streams. The High Council, now under the iron grip of Lyra's uncle, Lord Varnock, convened in secret. Varnock had spent years maneuvering to seize the throne, waiting for Lyra to die in battle or disgrace. Her survival was a setback. Her bond with a human, unthinkable. "She has defiled our bloodline," Varnock hissed during the council session, his voice echoing in the chamber of mirrored stone. "A human, a creature of chaos and war, now claims kinship with House Vale. This cannot stand." But others were less certain. The old traditions were clear. Blood gift between royal and savior was sacred. To reject it would be to spit on the ancestors. And Lyra was beloved by the people. Her return had already sparked celebrations in the lower districts. Meanwhile, in the royal infirmary, Joran woke to a room that looked like it had been grown rather than built. Walls of living crystal, floors of polished moonstone, and air that smelled faintly of jasmine and ozone. Lyra sat beside his bed, reading from a glowing scroll. "You're awake," she said, without looking up. "Good. You've slept for 2 days." 2 days. Joran croaked, his throat dry. "Did anyone think to bring water?" She handed him a goblet filled with a shimmering blue liquid. "Verithran rehydration serum," It tastes like regret and mint. He took a sip. Tasted like cold lightning and honey. Not bad. She finally looked at him, her blue eyes searching his face. You saved me. Why? He shrugged, then winced at the pain in his shoulder. I don't know. Maybe I was tired of watching people die. Maybe I thought you looked too pretty to rot in the sand. She blinked, then laughed. A clear, ringing sound that made the crystals in the walls hum in response. You are strange, Joran Vale. And you're terrifying, he shot back. 1 minute you're dying in the dirt. The next you're dragging me into a royal marriage I never signed up for. It is not marriage yet, she corrected gently. It is betrothal. Promise. The final bond requires the ceremony of twin flames, beneath the heartstone of Verithra. And if I say no? Her expression darkened. Then the bond remains incomplete. I live but weakened, and you will be hunted. My uncle will brand you a blood thief, a defiler. He will send assassins. Not just here, but across the galaxy. Joran exhaled sharply. So I'm either your fiancé or a dead man. Great choices. There is a third option, she said, leaning closer. You help me reclaim my throne. Together. He studied her, the determination in her eyes, the quiet fire beneath her regal calm. This wasn't just about survival. It was about justice. About a people being led by a tyrant who'd rather see his niece dead than share power. All right, he said slowly. But I'm not wearing one of those ridiculous feathered hats. Lyra smiled. No hats. I promise. Over the next week, Joran was thrust into a world of alien politics, ancient rituals, and deadly court intrigue. He trained with Verithran weapons, learning to wield a plasma whip that coiled around his wrist like a living serpent. He studied their language, stumbling over guttural consonants and harmonic vowels. And he learned the truth about the war. It hadn't started over minerals, as the humans believed, but over a lie. Varnock had sabotaged the peace talks, framing the Terran core for an attack on a Verithran nursery. He needed war to consolidate power. Lyra, meanwhile, discovered that Joran wasn't just a soldier, he was a strategist. He saw patterns in troop movements, weaknesses in Varnock's security grid, and opportunities in the chaos of the divided court. He also had a knack for defusing tension with dry humor that baffled the Verithrans but made Lyra laugh until her sides ached. You call this a security protocol? Joran asked one evening, watching a group of royal guards perform a ceremonial dance that doubled as a combat drill. Looks more like interpretive ballet with knives. It is the dance of the 7 blades, Lyra said, trying not to smile. Each movement honors a fallen ancestor. Right? Well, if your uncle attacks during the 3rd pirouette, you're all dead. She rolled her eyes, but later that night, she adjusted the guard rotation based on his suggestions. Their bond deepened, not just through shared danger, but through quiet moments. Watching the twin moons rise over the floating spires, debating the ethics of artificial intelligence over spiced tea, or arguing over whether Earth's oceans were truly blue. They're green near the coasts, Joran insisted, and brown near cities. Don't romanticize it. But danger was never far. One night, assassins slipped into the palace. Shadow walkers trained in the art of silence and poison. Joran woke to the scent of bitter almonds and the glint of a blade in the moonlight. He rolled off the sleeping mat just in time, grabbing a ceremonial dagger from the wall. The fight was short, brutal, and messy. He took a slash across the ribs but managed to disarm and subdue the attacker. Lyra arrived moments later, breathless, her eyes wide with fear. Not for herself, but for him. You could have died, she whispered, pressing a glowing salve to his wound. So could you, he said, wincing. Next time. Maybe post a guard who doesn't fall asleep humming lullabies. She didn't laugh. Instead, she placed her hand over his heart. Your blood saved me. I will not let yours be spilled in vain. He looked into her eyes and saw something he hadn't expected. Not just gratitude, but affection. Real, raw, and terrifying. Before he could respond, alarms blared through the palace. Red light pulsed along the corridors. Varnock had made his move. He'd seized the Heartstone Chamber, the sacred core of Verithran power, and declared himself eternal sovereign. Any who opposed him would be branded traitors. The royal guard was divided. Half remained loyal to Lyra. The other half followed Varnock's promise of order and vengeance against the humans. We must act now, Lyra said, strapping on a lightweight armor of woven star metal. If he completes the coronation right beneath the Heartstone, His claim becomes unbreakable. Joran grabbed his plasma rifle, modified with Verithran tech to fire crystalline rounds. Then let's crash his party. They moved through the palace like ghosts, aided by loyalists who opened secret passages and disabled surveillance drones. The Heartstone chamber lay at the mountain's peak, accessible only by the Bridge of Echoes, a narrow span of light that tested the traveler's soul. Only those with pure intent could cross. "You'll never make it," Lyra warned Joran as they approached the bridge. "It reads your heart." "I've got nothing to hide," he said, though his stomach twisted. "Except maybe that time I stole rations in basic training." To their surprise, the bridge solidified beneath his feet. The light pulsed warmly around him. Lyra looked stunned. "It accepts you." "Guess I'm not as bad as I look," he said, grinning. Inside the chamber, Varnock stood beneath the Heartstone, a massive, pulsing crystal that floated in midair, radiating waves of energy. He wore the crown of thorns, a circlet of black metal that dug into his scalp, drawing blood. His eyes glowed with stolen power. "Sister," he sneered as they entered. "And your pet human. How quaint." "This ends now, Varnock," Lyra said, her voice ringing with authority. "You have betrayed our people, our ancestors, and the peace we were meant to build." "Peace," Varnock laughed, a harsh, grating sound. "Peace is weakness. War is purity. And with the Heartstone's power, I will cleanse this world of all impurities, including you." He raised his hand, and the Heartstone flared. Energy lashed out like whips, forcing Joran and Lyra to dive for cover. The chamber trembled. Cracks spiderwebbed across the walls. Joran returned fire, his crystalline rounds shattering against Varnock's energy shield. "He's drawing power from the stone. We need to break the connection." "How?" Lyra shouted, deflecting a blast with her plasma whip. "The crown. It's the conduit." Without thinking, Joran charged not at Varnock, but at the base of the Heartstone. He planted explosive charges along its energy conduits, the same kind used to breach hulls in zero-G combat. "Cover me." Lyra unleashed a storm of blue fire, her whip crackling like lightning. She moved with lethal grace, driving Varnock back, giving Joran the seconds he needed. Detonating in 3-2, the explosion wasn't loud. It was silent, a vacuum of sound that sucked the air from the room. The Heartstone flickered, dimmed, then reignited with a blinding flash. Varnock screamed as the crown shattered, the stolen energy surging back into the stone. But the chamber was collapsing. Rocks rained from the ceiling. The bridge was gone. "Jump!" Joran yelled, grabbing Lyra's hand. They leaped into the abyss just as the chamber imploded behind them. Wind roared in their ears. Below, the city lights glittered like scattered stars. Then arms caught them. Loyalist skiffs, hovering in the smoke and dust, their pilots risking everything. As they were pulled aboard, Lyra clung to Joran, her breath ragged. "You did it." "We did it," he corrected. But the victory was fragile. Varnock was gone, swallowed by the collapsing chamber, but his followers remained. The war wasn't over, and now, with Lyra's claim to the throne reasserted, the galaxy would be watching. Back in the rebuilt palace, under the light of the twin moons, Lyra stood before the council. She declared a new era, one of truth, reconciliation, and, controversially, alliance with the Terran core. She named Joran not just her betrothed, but her shield of the realm, a title never before given to an outsider. He stood beside her, uncomfortable in formal robes, but holding his head high. He wasn't a prince. He wasn't even sure he wanted to be, but he'd made a choice in the desert, and he wouldn't walk away from it. Later, on a balcony overlooking the city, Lyra turned to him. The ceremony of twin flames must still be performed, to seal the bond, to heal the rift between our peoples. Joran looked at her, blue skin glowing in the moonlight, hair like liquid night, eyes full of hope and fear. He thought of the battlefield, the blood, the absurdity of it all. And then he thought of her laugh, her courage, the way she'd carried him when he couldn't walk. "All right," he said, "but no hats." She laughed, and this time he laughed with her. Far below, the city hummed with life. Above, the stars watched silently. The war wasn't over. The path ahead was uncertain, tangled with politics, prejudice, and the ghosts of battles past. But for the first time in a long time, there was a chance, not just for peace but for something new. Something born not of conquest, but of a single act of mercy in a desert of blood and sand. The days following Varnok's fall should have been a time of healing, but peace on Verithra proved as fragile as spun glass. Though Lyra now sat upon the obsidian throne, her authority was contested in the outer provinces, where Varnok's loyalists still whispered rebellion in the shadows of obsidian spires. Worse, the Terran High Command, unaware of the truth behind the war's origins, had dispatched a new fleet, Operation Iron Accord, to liberate Verithra from what they believed was a tyrannical alien regime. Joran's frantic comms to his superiors went unanswered. His old command had branded him a defector, possibly brainwashed or worse, collaborating with the enemy. Lyra tried to reassure him. "They will listen when they see the evidence," she said one evening, her fingers tracing the scar on his ribs, the one from the assassin's blade. "We have the data cores from Varnok's private vault. They prove he orchestrated the nursery bombing." "Data doesn't matter if they don't want to see it," Joran replied, staring out over the floating city. "Humans fear what they don't understand. And you're very hard to understand." She smiled faintly. "And yet you try." Their bond had deepened in quiet ways. He no longer flinched when she touched him. She no longer stiffened when he cracked a joke during council meetings. But the ceremony of twin flames loomed, a ritual that would fuse their life energies permanently, not just politically, but biologically. It was said that after the ceremony, a Verithran royal and their bonded would share dreams, emotions, even pain. Joran wasn't sure he was ready for that kind of intimacy. He'd spent his life building walls, not bridges. Then came the first twist. A Verithran elder, one of the few who remembered the old ways, approached Lyra with a grim warning. The blood gift Joran had given her was not just binding. It was incomplete. Human blood could stabilize a dying Verithran, yes, but without the ceremony of twin flames within one lunar cycle, the donor's life force would begin to fade. Not dramatically, just a slow weakening, fatigue, susceptibility to illness. And if the ceremony wasn't completed before the second moon reached its zenith, the donor would die. Joran laughed when Lyra told him, "So let me get this straight. I save your life, and now I'm on a cosmic expiration date?" "It is not a punishment," she said, her voice tight with worry. "It is balance. The universe demands reciprocity." He stopped laughing when he woke the next morning, unable to lift his arm without dizziness. His vision blurred during training. The medics found nothing wrong, no infection, no injury, just a gradual, inexplicable decline. "You're fading," Lyra whispered one night, pressing her forehead to his. "I can feel it, like a candle burning too fast." "I'm fine," he lied. She wasn't fooled. Desperate, she sought out the Oracle of the Shattered Peaks, a reclusive mystic said to commune with the Heartstone's echoes. The journey was perilous, through canyons where gravity shifted unpredictably and storms of crystalline dust could flay flesh from bone. Joran insisted on coming, despite his worsening condition. "If I'm gonna die," he said, "I'd rather do it climbing a mountain than lying in a fancy bed." The Oracle was not what they expected. Not an ancient crone, but a child no older than 10 with eyes that held galaxies. She sat cross-legged on a floating stone, humming a tune that made the air vibrate. "You seek answers," the child said, without opening her eyes. "But you already know them. Tell me how to save him," Lyra pleaded. "The bond must be sealed," the Oracle said. "But not beneath the Heartstone. Not yet. The stone is wounded. It rejected Varnok's corruption, but its light is dim. To perform the ceremony now would drain Joran completely." "Then what do we do?" Joran asked, leaning heavily on his rifle. The Oracle finally opened her eyes, silver, endless. "There is another way, the Well of Echoes, beneath the Crimson Wastes, where your blood first mingled. The desert remembers." The journey back to the battlefield was a nightmare. Joran's strength waned with every passing hour. He slept more than he was awake, his skin growing pale, his pulse faint. Lyra carried him part of the way, her own energy flagging from the strain of their partial bond. When they finally reached the dunes where it all began, the suns beat down with cruel indifference. The Well of Echoes wasn't a well at all, but a sinkhole lined with ancient, bioluminescent fungi that pulsed in time with Verithra's core. The air hummed with residual energy, the memory of every life that had bled into the sand. "This is it," Lyra said, lowering Joran gently to the ground. "The ceremony can be performed here, but it requires more than blood. It requires truth." "What kind of truth?" he asked, his voice weak. "The truth you hide even from yourself." She knelt beside him, placing her hands on his chest. Tell me why you really gave me your blood, Joran. Not because you were tired of death. Not because I was pretty. The real reason. He looked away, then sighed. Because I saw you reaching for that dagger, and I thought, she's fighting to the end. And I hadn't fought for anything real in years. Not since my sister died on Mars. I joined the Corps to forget. But you reminded me what it felt like to care. Tears welled in Lyra's eyes, cobalt droplets that shimmered as they fell onto his chest. That is enough. She began the ritual, chanting in the old tongue, her voice weaving through the desert wind. She pricked her finger and his, pressing them together over the glowing fungi. Their blood mingled again, red and blue swirling into violet, and sank into the earth. Light erupted from the well. Tendrils of energy wrapped around them, lifting them off the ground. Joran gasped as warmth flooded his veins. Not just his own strength returning, but something more. He felt Lyra's joy, her fears, her memories, her mother's lullabies, her first flight on a sky serpent, the loneliness of being heir to a dying tradition. And she felt his, the sting of loss, the weight of duty, the quiet hope he'd buried deep. When the light faded, they lay entwined in the sand, breathless, changed. But their relief was short-lived. A shadow fell over them, not from the suns but from above. A Terran dropship hovered overhead, its hull emblazoned with the insignia of the Iron Accord. Hatches opened. Armored figures rappelled down, weapons raised. At their head stood General Rourke, Joran's former commanding officer, a man with a face like chiseled granite and eyes that had never softened, not even at funerals. Corporal Vale, Rourke barked. You're under arrest for treason, desertion, and consorting with the enemy. Joran struggled to his feet, shielding Lyra with his body. She's not the enemy, sir. Varnock was. He's gone. She's trying to make peace. Peace? Rourke sneered. She's got you spouting alien propaganda. Look at you, bonded like some primitive ritual. You're compromised. I'm awake, Joran shot back. For the first time in my life. Rourke raised his sidearm. Last chance. Step away from the alien. Lyra stepped forward, her voice calm but resonant. General, if you fire that weapon, you ignite a war that cannot be won. We have proof of Varnock's deception. We offer alliance, not surrender. Rourke hesitated just for a heartbeat. Then his calm crackled. Sir, we've got incoming Verithran rebels. They're attacking the fleet. Chaos erupted. From the dunes, skiffs rose like vengeful spirits. Varnock's remnants, led by a scarred warlord named Kthar, who saw Lyra's moment of vulnerability as his chance to seize power. Plasma fire lit the sky. Sand turned to glass. In the confusion, Rourke's soldiers scattered. Joran grabbed Lyra's hand. We have to get to the capital. Kthar will burn the city to the ground. But as they ran, a blast struck the ground near them. Joran shoved Lyra aside, taking the full force of the explosion. He flew backward, slamming into a rock formation. Blood, red this time, poured from his temple. No! Lyra screamed, rushing to him. Through the ringing in his ears, Joran heard her voice, felt her hands on his face. And then, through their new bond, he felt something else. A presence stirring deep within her. Not just her consciousness, but another. Faint, ancient, sleeping. The oracle's words echoed in his mind. The desert remembers. As darkness closed in, Joran realized the truth. The Well of Echoes hadn't just sealed their bond. It had awakened something in Lyra, something tied to Verithra's oldest secret. The Heartstone wasn't just a power source. It was a prison, and Varnock hadn't been its only prisoner. When Joran woke again, he was in a rebel camp, bound in energy cuffs. Lyra was gone. Kthar stood over him, holding a vial of cobalt blood, hers. The princess has been indisposed, Kthar hissed, his voice like grinding stone. But her blood holds the key to the Heartstone's true power. And with your human DNA mixed in, it's perfect. Joran's heart stopped. What did you do to her? Kthar smiled. I woke the sleeper, far beneath the capital, in a chamber older than the mountains. Lyra hung suspended in a column of liquid light. Her eyes were open, but not her own. They glowed with a cold, golden fire. Around her, glyphs pulsed on the walls, telling a story forgotten by time. The Verithrans hadn't evolved on this world. They'd been engineered, created by an ancient race to guard the sleeper, a being of pure energy, imprisoned in the planet's core. The royal bloodline was the lock. And the blood gift from an outsider? The key. Kthar believed he could control the sleeper, use it as a weapon. But the sleeper had its own will, and it recognized Lyra, not as a vessel, but as a descendant of its jailers. Back in the camp, Joran managed to pick his cuffs using a shard of shrapnel hidden in his boot. He moved like a ghost through the tents, stealing a plasma pistol and a comm unit. He patched into the Terran frequency, bypassing encryption with old codes only he knew. "Rourke," he whispered into the comm. "If you're still alive, listen. The rebels have Lyra. They're going to unleash something worse than war. You want proof Varnock lied? Here it is. Kthares using the same tech Varnock used to fake the nursery attack. I've got coordinates. Come not as conquerors. Come as allies." Silence. Then a gruff voice. "You'd better be right, Vale, or I'll kill you myself." Joran smiled grimly. Fair enough. He infiltrated the underground complex alone, using vents and forgotten service tunnels. He found Lyra just as the sleeper began to rise, a swirling vortex of golden energy coalescing in the chamber's center. Kthar stood before it, arms raised, chanting. But Lyra's eyes met Joran's through the light, and in them he saw her fighting the possession. He didn't hesitate. He fired not at Kthar, but at the containment glyphs on the walls. The ancient script shattered. The sleeper roared, its form destabilizing. "No!" Kthar screamed, turning. But Joran was already moving. They clashed in brutal, close-quarters combat. Joran was weaker but faster. He used Kthar's rage against him, dodging, weaving, until he drove a plasma blade through the warlord's chest. As Kthar fell, the sleeper turned its gaze on Joran. But then Lyra spoke, her voice layered with something ancient. "Enough!" The golden light stilled. "You are free," she said. "But do not destroy. Remember." The sleeper pulsed once, gently, then dissolved into the walls, returning to slumber. Not imprisoned, but at peace. Lyra collapsed. Joran caught her before she hit the floor. Above ground, the battle raged. But then, something changed. Terran ships and Varithran skiffs began firing together at the remaining rebel forces. Rourke had come. In the days that followed, an uneasy truce formed. Rourke, confronted with undeniable evidence, and the sight of a human and alien fighting side by side to save two worlds, agreed to a ceasefire. Talks began, not of surrender, but of coexistence. Joran and Lyra stood once more on the palace balcony, watching the twin suns set. "You're stuck with me now," he said. She leaned into him, her head on his shoulder. "I was from the moment you gave me your blood." "And the sleeper?" he asked quietly. "Is it really gone?" "It sleeps," she said. "But it remembers us. And it will watch." He kissed her then, softly, under the alien sky. Not as soldier and princess. Not as human and alien. But as two souls who had chosen each other in a universe that tried to keep them apart. Yet even as they embraced, a signal pulsed from deep space. A transmission not from Earth, not from Varithra, but from the edge of known space. Encrypted. Ancient. And addressed to both of them. The war was over. But the story was just beginning. Years later, beneath the twin suns of a peaceful Varithra, Joran Vale, no longer just a soldier, but the honored prince consort of House Vale, stood hand in hand with Queen Lyra at the base of the restored Heartstone, now glowing with a gentle, steady light. The ceremony of twin flames had long been completed, not in desperation, but in joy, witnessed by humans and Varithrans alike. The war was a memory, the scars softened by time and trust. Their wedding was unlike any in galactic history. Terran brass bands played alongside Varithran crystal choirs. Human guests wore robes woven with starlight thread, and the feast lasted 3 days. Joran still grumbled about the ceremonial sash, but he wore it proudly, and only once joked that his vows sounded like a military briefing. From their union bloomed a new lineage, children with storm-gray eyes and cobalt skin, with elfin ears and wild tufts of blue-black hair that shimmered like midnight oceans. They ran through the floating gardens of Javale, fluent in both standard and the harmonic tongue of Varithra, building sandcastles in the Crimson Wastes one day and piloting training skiffs the next. Their laughter echoed through the palace halls, a living bridge between worlds. Joran never lost his dry wit or his love for bad coffee, and Lyra never stopped rolling her eyes at his earth idioms. But every evening, without fail, they walked the sky promenade together, watching the stars rise over a galaxy slowly learning to heal. And though distant signals still whispered from the void, and new challenges would surely come, they faced them not as soldier and queen, but as partners, bound by blood, choice, and a love that began in the dust of a battlefield and grew into something far greater than either had ever dreamed.